and it is a fabulous way to start this night. Let's all say thank you to Governor Kristi Noem for coming to Michigan. So I'll just tell you a quick story. When you're running for office and God wants to use you, it's not easy, because generally God doesn't call you to the easy stuff, right? And when you find out, when you get into politics, you find out it's nothing like business. Everybody is not your friend. You're not trying to make a deal. It is very hard to find friends. But one thing I found is that the Republican governors in this country are amazing. So many of them would take a moment and take time to sit with me and talk with me, and Governor Noem is no exception. But I will say that she went above and beyond, because we would go to these meetings with the Republican Governors Association, and she said, come and sit with me and have lunch with me and let me talk to you. And it's so important, because she comes from a state that is thriving. And when you look at Michigan and you see that the governor here, her own administration, put out a report that we will not have population growth through 2050. And you see that South Dakota is growing every day, record numbers. That's why it's important to have people like Governor Noem sit down and talk to us about what we can do to improve. And so we are so grateful to you for being here tonight.
She should have been. Can you even imagine what Michigan would have looked like if she would have been? It would have been a whole different state, wouldn't it? You'd be growing, you'd be thriving, you'd have more money in your pockets, your kids would be safer, they'd have a better future, their teenagers and college students would have the careers that they want, homes would be cheaper, they'd be more affordable because you have more opportunities. In South Dakota, just since I've been governor, the incomes have gone up 36%. We are the only state in the country where our overdoses are going down, our mental health challenges are going down, our suicide rates are going down, and it's because people are happier. And the reason they're happier is because we've just let them be free. We let them make decisions for themselves that they should be making. You know, I think the world of Tudor. I just think she's fantastic. I think she's normal, which is so amazing in politics. You can find somebody who's normal, that just is doing this for all the right reasons. She just wants to serve people. And I think the conversation we need to have tonight is going to be a family discussion. I really want to have a family discussion with all of you about this election, what it means for our future, and why I'm going to ask you to do more than you've ever done before. I'm going to get you to figure out a way to be uncomfortable. Be uncomfortable in your skin, knowing that every day you don't have enough hours to go out and talk to enough people. Because we, as people in this country that love America, we love our history, we've got a lot of faith and hope, we have decided that it's more important to be right than to go out and win the hearts and minds of people, than to go out there and really talk to people and spend time having conversations about what it means to their family, to bring people a little bit of hope. One of my favorite scripture verses that I talk about every once in a while is that scripture verse in Deuteronomy that says, how lovely are the feet of them that bring good news, proclaiming peace, announcing news of happiness. And it's our God reigns. But and it says our God reigns several times, but what is amazing about that is I would love it if when people saw you coming and you want to talk politics, and you want to talk about this election, that they would recognize that you're coming as someone who's bringing hope, bringing news of peace, proclaiming happiness. And that's really what our policies that we believe in, they bring that. They bring a belief in our Constitution, the opportunity that it provides to grow up in America and have every opportunity in front of you, not equal outcomes, but equal opportunities to be successful and to go out and do with your life what you feel called to do. And that's really the conversation we need to have with people this election cycle. So we'll talk about that in our discussion a little bit. I'll talk a little bit about how different it is in South Dakota than maybe what Michigan has gone through the last several years. And what we'll talk about is how leadership has consequences. It matters who's in elected office. It matters who's in that White House. I will tell you what, I'm here for President Donald J. Trump tonight because when I was governor, When I was governor, he let me do my job. When he was in the White House, he let me make the best decisions for my people in my state. And we were able to never have a mandate, never close a single business. I never once even defined what an essential business was because I didn't believe that governors have the authority to tell you your business isn't essential. So we didn't do that. We were the only state in the country that never took the elevated unemployment benefits. Said, thank you, Mr. President, for the flexibility, but our people want to work. And they did. And we broke the nation's lowest unemployment record in the history of the United States of America at 1.9%, and we're still at just 2% right now. You guys are more than double. We are number one in the nation for the lowest unemployment rate still, and Michigan's number 41. So when you grow up, you can be like us. How does that sound? All right? Our people work, and they're happy, and they're thriving, and they're doing better, and we're having so many babies. It is amazing. We are the number one state for birth rate, too, in the country. I think people are having babies because they're happy. But
And she's right. Michigan can be that, just so you know. Michigan can be that.
yeah, I don't think you have to be, philosophical about this election. You don't have to say, if we did this, if we cut taxes, if we eased up on regulations, if we actually trusted people and let them use personal responsibility, which is what our Constitution requires of us as leaders, that you will be more successful. All you have to do is look from state to state and see that it mattered who was in charge and see what happened to their people and their families in those states. All we did in South Dakota is what conservatives have always believed. We just did it, and it worked. And it worked. Historic revenues. We paid off all of our debts and bonds, even for our universities and our technical schools. We built roads and bridges and dams and railroads, and we did the largest tax cut in South Dakota history, and we still have more money in revenues than we ever had in history, and we don't have an income tax. We don't have a personal property tax. All we have is a 4.2% sales tax, and we're doing great.
And she was able to fix the roads without swearing about it.
Yes. Yes. In fact, today somebody actually sent me, it's funny, somebody sent me a map of the United States of America, and I think South Dakota was the state that swears the least, which I didn't even know that we were ranking. I don't think that's true, though. I've met enough ranchers for that. But that is, we had the chance when President Trump was in the White House to cut taxes. I served on the committee in Congress that worked on that bill for 2.5 years. He trusts you with your own money. He trusts you with your own money to go out and make the best decisions for your family. And let me tell you what, this Vice President Harris, her belief has always been that the government makes better decisions than you do. She wanted government-run health care. She wants the government to pay for college school loans. She wants the government to decide what your taxes are, and they all need to be higher. She has consistently mandated and dictated to people. It would be a whole different world if she gets into that White House than President Trump, and your future would be a lot less free. You'd have a lot less liberties, and I'm not certain if she's ever read the Constitution, because I've heard her embrace and seen her sign on to enough legislation and support it that clearly says that you get less control over your life.
Well, I think the important message here is that if you are in a Republican state, the Republican governor trusts you with your money. They don't want to take your money and use it elsewhere. And look, in Michigan, we could have had a much lower income tax, but the governor decided to increase it. So you could have a lower income tax, and we should be moving toward no income tax. We should be... And that's the problem with the Harris administration. What she has done as vice president, but what she would do as president, she's already told you she will take your money and give it to other people because she believes in redistribution of wealth. She's telling you when she says she's going to pay off student loans, when she says she's going to hand out $25,000 to everybody for a first home down payment. She's not telling people she is going to make them more prosperous. She's saying the government has to do this for you, and you have to be beholden to the government. That is how inflation rises. They want to keep us down.
You know, the average American family, since it's been the Harris administration in the White House the last 4 years, is making $33,000 less than they did previous to that. In fact, their energy costs have gone up by average of $4,900 per family just in the increase in energy costs. Gas is $1 more a gallon than it was 4 years ago. And when President Trump came into the White House, it went down, if you remember, because what did he do? He wanted an American energy supply. Just if we had it here, we were going to use our own resources, and we weren't going to rely on our enemies like the Harris administration has done. So I clearly see that when it comes to our policies, we can either put somebody in the White House who loves America, believes we should provide for ourselves, and rely on ourselves for our future, for our energy and our food supply, and that is exactly the opposite of what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have done the last 4 years.
And if you hear Donald Trump say, drill, baby, drill, you've heard that? There is a reason for that, because everything that moves in this country moves with energy, and everything you buy or consume has been moved. The idea that we have to do price fixing, that we have to go after corporations, is completely crazy. They've created the policies that have hurt us, and they want you to believe that it's some big bad corporation. They aren't for capitalism. They aren't for innovation. They have crushed innovation in this country in the last 4 years. The fact that we were not only energy independent, but we were headed toward energy dominance. There was a point when our gas companies were saying, man, we can't even make a profit. We've got so much extra energy here, because the United States of America is rich with energy. And that means that you have the most security in the world. But they want to take that away from us. And what does that do? It comes out of everybody's pocket in this room.
Well, you remember the Keystone XL pipeline, right? That was supposed to go through South Dakota. So what most people don't remember is that when President Trump was in the White House and then when Joe Biden was being sworn in, he canceled that on day one. But in our state, we already had all the equipment set up. The pipe was laid out across the state. Everything was there and prepared. All we had to do was put it in the ground and hook it up and get it going. In fact, most people don't realize it wasn't going to be the first pipeline that came from Canada and hauled resources down to the refinery to supply our country with energy. It was the third one. We already had 2 pipelines in the ground that went from the exact same points and delivered our oil. This one was going to be more technology advanced. It was going to be safer. It was going to be the security of having a pipeline that would carry more capacity. It's not like we didn't have pipelines in the ground already. This would have been the third one. We've already done it. It was nothing new, but they shut it down because they didn't want to rely on our own supply and our friends for energy. Instead, what are we doing now? We're enriching Iran, right? And our enemies, who are partnering with Russia, who are now supplying China with their energy supply, correct? We literally have countries that hate us partnering in new ways, and they're doing it to defeat the United States of America because they see an opportunity, because this Harris administration has been so weak. They've been so weak, and they've emboldened and enriched our enemies to such a point that they see an opportunity to finally cripple the United States of America, and that has long-term been their goal. This administration, the Harris administration, went back into the Iran nuclear deal immediately. They lifted the sanctions off of Iran. They've been able to keep billions of dollars, and they've used it to fund Hamas and terrorist activities around the world who just attack Americans and our way of life. That weakness on the world stage has huge consequences for us.
Well, look at the consequences it has had in this state. The way that has torn this state apart, because the Biden administration, the Harris administration, made the decision to take sanctions away from Iran. I think the total is close to $100 billion that Iran was enriched in the time that they have been in office. And do you know where that money went? October 7th. And that tore this state apart. And now we have people that are saying, what side are you on? What side are you on? We love people no matter what, and we were on the side of peace, and October 6th was fine. October 7th was funded by a terrorist country that was helped along by the Harris administration, and it has torn the lives of American citizens and Israelis and Palestinians apart because of the irresponsibility of the Harris administration.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We're going to talk about several topics tonight. We're going to talk about inflation and the economy because I think that's what every family is suffering with right now. Every family right now is struggling to prioritize what their costs will be. We'll talk a little bit about our border. We're going to give you guys a chance to ask us some questions. So if you want to be talking about something or ask a specific question on a topic, you'll get the chance to do that so you can be thinking about it. We're going to visit a little bit about this vice presidential candidate that Kamala has chosen, Tim Walz. I happen to know him pretty well, being my neighboring state, and we have taken just this last year, the last few months, over 7,000 Minnesotans and moved them over to South Dakota. We've had tens of thousands of Minnesotans who have decided to leave his state and come to South Dakota because of his policies and his dictator-type leadership skills that have been so devastating for his state. And then we're going to talk about the American dream and what that means. What does it look like under the choices that we have on the ballot this fall? But I know that with the Tudor was just talking about our national security, and that's one of those issues that I think a lot of Americans need to stop and pause for a minute and really realize the threats that we have and the insecurities that we have. I'm a farmer and a rancher, and have spent my life, raising food to feed this country and to feed the world. We had a very large operation when I was younger. My dad was killed in an accident when I was young, and I ended up quitting college and taking over our businesses. But I've worked on food policy for 30 years, and I watched over those last 30 years as China systematically came in, and first they started buying up our chemical companies in the United States. Then they started buying up our seed and fertilizer companies. Then we saw America, for a period of time, embrace selling citizenship to the United States for investment in our processing facilities. The vast majority of our processing facilities and meatpacking plants are owned by Chinese companies now, and people that are affiliated with the CCP. Now we have seen them come in, they've manipulated their currency, they've stolen our genetics and our IP, and now we're watching them buy our land and completing that full circle of our food production in the United States. China has had 1,000 years plan for world domination. They've been trying to take out the United States of America for hundreds of years. For the last 200 years, we have been a threat to them ever since we were established because we were so different in the experiment that our founders gave us. They gave us the most wonderful experiment in the history of the world by giving us this republic, and it was so different. And China has seen us as we rose to be the world's power as a threat to them, and they have a long-term plan to take us out, and they will make their people suffer in order to get that plan complete. If we think a pandemic was scary, wait until they control our food supply. And wait until you go to the grocery store and you realize you can't get food to feed your family because China's decided that you can't get your food. Did you know that they own quite a bit of our ports in the United States? The LA port that you hear Newsom bragging about all the time, it's 90% owned by Chinese companies and Chinese officials. They have started hoarding their shipping containers in China. Everything in this world that gets shipped across the ocean goes in a shipping container, doesn't it? Why do you think that they're keeping the shipping containers? So that we don't have access to them. That's what this election is about. That's how important it is to get President Trump back in the White House so that we have a strong leader that stands up for America, puts China back in its place, separates them between Russia and Iran. And when we can fight any of those enemies and beat them today, if they're all together, it gets really tough for us to win that battle if they're partnering together. And that's what this election is about, is what will America look like if we have a weak leader back in the White House like Kamala Harris?
And can we be protected from the invasion of China with this administration? No, we already know that Governor Walz is obsessed with China. He's lived there. His good grief, his wedding anniversary, he chose the massacre at Tiananmen Square, so it would be memorable. This is a man who idolizes the CCP, and I have a little bit different experience than the governor because I come from the manufacturing world, so I saw it from what they did to the manufacturing world, and I saw foundry after foundry after foundry close because the Chinese were coming in offering the lowest prices, and they were pirating all same thing, stealing our technology. And I will tell you today, there are not many people who come out of college and say, I would love to start a steel foundry. It's kind of a generational thing. sort of something that gets passed down, same as farms. When people come out of college, they don't say, man, I'd really like to start up a big dairy farm. It just doesn't happen today. They are generational businesses that get passed down from family to family, from father to son, from mother to daughter. These, once they're gone, they don't come back. No one starts them up again. And so when you hear her talking about food security and making sure that we have enough food to feed this country, what do you think the Chinese are doing buying up our land? They're weakening us. And a weak America cannot protect ourselves from a Chinese takeover. These are serious subjects. We're here, folks. The people who think this is way out in the future, this 100-year plan of China, we're on year like 85. They've already gotten this far. They have the largest navy in the world. A lot of people don't know that. China is very powerful. Our president decided to sit down and address the nation and tell the nation that he was stepping out of the presidential race. Didn't mention that he was doing it because he's cognitively declining. But he did announce that he was going to sit down and tell the world this. At the same time, China and Russia flew together off the coast of Alaska. First time they've ever flown together. It's here.
It is. And that's the challenges we have in front of us internationally, but we have challenges here at home too. I think every person that I talk to is challenged by the policies that are happening in their communities and their cities, the violence, the crime we're living with, what we have going on at the border, the invasion that we're seeing of dangerous illegal immigrants. Some of them are criminals. Just in 2023, we saw almost 170 of them that are on the terrorist watch list that came into this country that we know about. We don't know about the ones that we haven't caught, that we haven't found. And everybody has seen our communities change because of this. We know that there's about 10 million that have come into this country over the border. We don't know how many millions have come that we don't know about. There's been estimates as high as 15 to 16 to 20 million. They're fundamentally remaking this country by what they're doing and allowing dangerous individuals to come in and rape and murder our children and our sons and our daughters and our women and take advantage of them, and then killing our population with a drug overdose epidemic that is now the number one. Fentanyl is the number one killer of adults 18 to 45 years old now in the United States of America. Someone dies every 7 minutes. So we will have almost 9 or 10 people in this country will die while we just have this meeting here, while we sit here today and talk about this election. And that wasn't happening. It was just in 2019, it was 93% less. So it's almost doubled, gone up 93% in the last 4 to 5 years in the amount of deaths that we're seeing from drug overdoses. And where is fentanyl manufactured and made? In China. Is it on purpose? Absolutely. Absolutely. You want to take out a whole generation of Americans? You poison them. You poison them. So they will do anything to defeat us because of the threat that we face. And that is the challenge we have in front of us, and we need a president that recognizes that border needs to be closed, that we need to make sure that those dangerous individuals are removed from our country, and that when you break the law in the United States of America, there's just consequences. There's just consequences when you break the law.
And let's remember, this was something that Bill Clinton said. This was something that Barack Obama said. This was something that old Joe Biden said. Oh, now he's old. Previous Joe Biden said. Not President Joe Biden. This is a whole new situation that we're dealing with. And it's not something that they feel in their hearts when they tell you this, oh gosh, this is just such a loving thing. This is purely political. They have seized on an opportunity to create a divide. But the reality is we are now the second largest country in the world for human trafficking and sex trafficking. And the majority of that is kids. This administration lost 300,000 children. 300,000 children are either in slave labor, and I know you're going to say not in America. Yes. Yes, in this country. They're either in slave labor, or they are being trafficked, or they are dead. And the problem is that they are all tracked by the cartel. So when people tell you we have an open border, that border brings in hundreds of millions of dollars every year for the cartel. It's not open. It is fully and completely controlled by a criminal element. So there is no beauty in people coming across. There is no safety in people coming across. There is no salvation for those people coming that way across the border. They are never free. They do not enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy because they are controlled by a criminal element. They are marked for life. It is a terrible, tragic situation, especially for the little girls and boys that are used every single day because our president and our vice president decided politics was more important than people.
We have a situation in South Dakota where we have 9 Native American tribes. And most people don't realize that a Native American tribe and their reservation boundaries they're a sovereign nation. So I, as governor, have no jurisdiction there. Who has jurisdiction there for law and order is the tribal government and the federal government. They're the ones who come in and make sure that tribal law is upheld, that there isn't crimes being committed, and that communities are safe. Well, our federal government has dramatically failed our tribes in this country. In fact, my tribes are suing the federal government right now for lack of law enforcement in their areas and in their communities. I have some of the poorest communities in the country in South Dakota. In fact, out of the top 11 poorest counties in the nation, I have 5 of them in our state, and they're all in tribal areas. So these folks have 80 to 90% unemployment. They struggle with addiction and challenges and alcoholism. And what has happened since this border has been opened during this administration, and it started, a few years before that, but what has happened recently is that we have seen cartel affiliates in our tribal reservations operating unchecked. There is nobody there making sure that those cartel aren't there. They're trafficking people right through South Dakota. They're trafficking drugs through the Midwest, protected there and isolated from me because I have no jurisdiction there. I can't go there and arrest anybody for rape or murder or trafficking or drugs or being dealers. The only people who can do it is either the tribal law enforcement, who is dramatically underfunded. They need 10 times the amount of dollars to have the law enforcement officers that they need, and the federal government refuses to come in. So people always think about the border being at the southern part of the United States. We've got the border right in South Dakota. The cartel have figured out where they're protected in this country and where they can use as a home base to distribute their drugs and their trafficking, and it's happening right in South Dakota. I was the first governor in the country to send my National Guard down to the border to help when Texas asked for it, because I recognized it was a war zone back then. Since then, we have deployed National Guard 7 times to assist down there. We have gone down there on a security mission. We've gone down there and sent our helicopters to help do surveillance. We've sent an engineering unit down there that built fence and barrier. We built over 5 miles of barrier, cleared 46 miles of barrier, cleared and fixed patches that had been broken, but continuing to do all we can to support what Texas is doing, what Governor Abbott is doing, but also doing what we can because of the failure of this administration just to enforce our border and to make sure that we can protect our kids as much as possible and protect their future by not allowing that type of invasion to continue.
And it affects us too. I mean, obviously, we are a border state. We have a border with Canada, and the scary thing is you may not realize the majority of people who have come through on the terror watch list are coming from Canada. We have a very dangerous situation here. So every state is a border state. I mean, we genuinely are, but every state is a border state. And even if you just talk to Sheriff Bouchard, you would understand the drugs that are coming into this country. And it's crazy. When I was campaigning, I went to their crime lab, and they pull out, this just came today. And I think of fentanyl as like these little pills, and you're gonna see it and you're gonna know, and it's this giant brick. And I was just flabbergasted. I'm like, you just find this in someone's house? Yeah, we did a raid today, found this in someone's house. The tech has to be extraordinarily careful because even the tiniest speck will kill you. This is just traveling around our community, in people's homes, going to our kids. They want to get that to our kids. This is so dangerous now. And we have people who are duping you when they say they care about law and order. They don't care about law and order. Look, we had 3 police officers killed in 1 month's time in this state. I don't think the governor went to a single funeral.
Oh my goodness, really?
We had the largest mass shooting the state has ever seen. What, a month ago? The governor's never spoken about it. You've never seen so much as a tweet. But Rochester had a shooting, she tweeted about that, but the people of Detroit she didn't tweet about. They don't care about the areas that are hit hardest with crime.
My goodness. She's a wreck. Somebody should run against her. Oh. I thought she was a mess last night, too. Or was it 2 nights ago that she spoke?
I will say, I think she looked beautiful. Though.
Oh, she looked
beautiful. I give her that.
Yeah.
She had the dress was stunning.
This is what I think. I think that this is what I wish. We live in a country that's addicted to being offended, right? Don't we all just love to be offended by each other? Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they said that. It's horrible, I'm so offended. And they quit talking to each other. And she's really good at offending people because I think she tries to do it on purpose. Yeah. Like some of the things that she says and does, some people do it without really realizing it. But I had a pastor years ago say something to me that, Kristi, people are going to throw offenses out at you all the time, but you're the one who decides if you want to pick it up and carry it around with you. And then you're the one who's carrying the burden. So you have the opportunity every day to just make a decision that when people offend you, and politics does it, it really does. And some of the things she said offended me. So I've got to take my own sermon here. But we have the chance to, when people offend us and we're talking to them about this election, and when they're talking about President Trump versus Vice President Harris, that they're going to say things to us and we're going to have to decide not to be offended and to keep the relationship. To keep the relationship. Because I truly believe we tell our kids and our high schoolers and our college students that your education is the most important thing for your life. Your education is, or where you grew up is the most important thing. And I just disagree. I think the most important thing in your life is relationships. Yeah. The relationships that you have in your life will determine the opportunities that you get, what you learn from each other, maybe the person that you meet at that meeting or you have a conversation with at that gas station is somebody that will change your life forever. Words have consequences. Words have power. How many of you have somebody that said something to you at some point in life that you still remember today? An offhanded comment, something they said, but it changed the way you thought about yourself or it changed your perspective. So remember that your words have power. And when you leave here and you speak, choose not to be offended by political conversations you're having with people. Choose instead to recognize that the words that you speak will impact somebody and try to speak different words that change their perspective. Help them think about this election different than they had before. Have them at a grocery store start talking about the price of pickles. Do something like that. That's what I go a couple of times a month and just run a checkout line at a grocery store. I did that when I was in college, but it is the most eye-opening experience anybody could have. And I would say every elected official should just go do it. They will let you do it because they can't hire enough people who want to run checkout lines at grocery stores. And nobody can count money anymore. But you will be shocked. I bet 2 out of 5 people that come through the checkout line, they get to where the total comes and they don't have enough money. And they have to sit there and decide what they're going to put back. And it's amazing to me the amount of people that don't have enough money to get their groceries anymore. Or they come through with 10 or 15 items and they're like, but I got this last month and I had enough money, this month I don't. And they're trying to decide, should they put back the mustard or the olives? And they wrestle with it and then they decide they're gonna go put it back. I had a mom the other day tell me, I saw her in a Walmart and she told me she was trying to decide if she could buy her 10-year-old son the backpack or the new shoes he wanted for school. This year, she couldn't get both of them. And that's the discussion families are having. So we need to let them know that it's the policies of the leaders that are deciding what those costs are. The reason that families can't buy a home anymore is because somebody in power made a decision that drove up interest rates, put more debt on this country, crippled our economy. Your gas costs more because somebody in Washington, D.C. decided it was more important to outsource our energy rather than to rely on ourselves. Those are all conversations you can have in your day-to-day life with people who aren't used to talking about that with somebody. So I think we probably should go to questions. It looks like there's quite a few people back there standing. Go. Did you want to?
I just want to add really quickly to your point of finding joy in the trials. If you've been listening to this past week, which I'm sure none of you were, but on the off chance, in case you didn't hear it, there was a kind of common theme of I've been held back by gender and race and discriminated against. And so we heard that from Michelle Obama, and she was First Lady, in case you didn't know. And we heard that from Oprah, and she's just like, you know, everybody wants to be Oprah, you know? And we heard that from Kamala Harris, and I think that the overwhelming message from that is, wow, and look what they were able to do in America. Look what they were able to become in this country despite that, because God doesn't tell you it's going to be easy. He doesn't call you to the easy things, and he doesn't tell you you're not going to be discriminated against and you're not going to be offended, because every day I can tell you, you will be, and people will tell you there's a reason, no matter what color you are, no matter what gender you are, no matter what your preferences are, people will tell you there is a reason you can't do what you're going out to do, and yet in this country, you can. So don't listen to the people who say oppression is real. You can break through every day because you live here, and this is a special place.
Okay, yeah. Should we go to questions?
Yes.
Miss Catherine.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you. Right now, we have a question from Joe, and he'd like to ask it specifically.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, just real quick. Obviously, we've lost our moral compass in this nation, it seems. My question, I am a huge Republican, and I'm disappointed in the Republican Party deeply because the squeaky wheel gets the most grease. Why isn't any Republican truly going out there screaming every day, if it takes every week, to stop or say something about what's happening? That goes for both the state and the national. The statewide, that's the only question I have. That's got to start making fuss on a daily basis. I've seen you done some of it. God bless you. Help this country before we lose it.
So are you talking about standing for what's right and wrong, standing for faith, or are you talking
Not
about
all of it? It all encompasses everything. There's a right and a wrong. Child, this deal, this thing going on with children. We have schools that the teachers are not telling, they're telling kids, and they can tell the kids that they can get gender, trans, all this stuff. Why isn't the Republican Party in Michigan, because that's what, or nationally, stand up every day and say, what are you doing to my children? What do you, every day they should be up there. The squeaky wheel, I'm done, sorry.
Well, I'll tell you what I think. No, the media doesn't cover it. And it's not just the people in elected office's responsibility. I feel like it's all of our responsibility. We will never change this country if you just point at somebody else and tell them to go do their job. And I get your heart, because you're not saying that. You just want us to be bold. You want us to be bold and stand for truth, and that doesn't mean we have to be ugly. Yes, that is correct. And that's why we see too many people that get elected to office and then they forget their moral compass. They want to be popular, and they want to make sure they can get reelected the next time, so they forget to stand. Listen, when I was the only state in the country that never shut down a single business and never shut down a single event, do you remember when we held the Sturgis motorcycle bike rally? I mean, when we held the July 3rd event at Mount Rushmore, I mean, I was getting killed every night on the national news, like Rachel Maddow and Elizabeth Warren. They called me dangerous and reckless. I mean, I literally just didn't even, I still don't really watch the news because it's just too hard on me. You guys don't know this about my personality, but I tend to be an introvert. I mean, I love people, and I like to be around them, but walking into a room full of strangers is still something I have to go, all right, Kristi, you can do this. You know, this is not my nature. I still get nervous for every interview, every speech, but I'll tell you what, I had a dad every day when I was growing up that said, we don't complain about things, we fix them. And so there's something he built into us kids that we don't ever get to sit home and just complain. You have to go do something, go fix it, go be somebody who's a part of the solution. I told one of my staffers one day, he was exhausted. I was just getting killed over something, and especially when more people in the country started to know who I was, I got more and more attacks from everybody. It was liberals who didn't like what I was standing for. It was Republicans who thought I was competition. I mean, you'd be surprised how much you get attacked by your own party half the time, just because they think that maybe you're going to get to be a big deal and they want to be the big deal. But anyways, I just remember I was looking at one of the people that worked in my press shop, and he just was like exhausted. And I said, Ian, when you die, you will be able to say you lived a life of significance. And he went, okay. But that's the only way we change this country, is we have to decide it's not about us. I've got 3 kids, and my 2 girls are married. I've got 3 grandbabies and 1 on the way. I look at little Miss Addie, who's 3. She's the oldest, so they're all 3 under 3. But I just think, what kind of a country am I giving her? I mean, I can't even, look at how this world has changed in the last 5 to 6 years. Can you imagine what it's going to look like in the next 15 to 20? I can't. So that, I don't sleep at night because I think about that. And I got to grow up in the most amazing country in the world. And if we lose the United States of America, where will we go? Where will we go that's better than what we have right now? So my hope is that you encourage every person that's elected to office, walk alongside them and hold them accountable to stand for truth. And tell them when they get attacked for it, you're going to hug them. And you're going to write them a note. And you're going to write something nice on their Facebook page. So they read 10 ugly things, they see 1 nice thing, and they get encouraged by it. But every elected official needs to stand for truth. But we change people's hearts by you building relationships with them too, and being bold enough to speak to them and to speak the truth to them. Listen, I married into my husband's family. They were all Democrats. And then I take their name and I run for Congress as a Republican. Can you imagine? I mean, it really, what a horrible thing to do to them. And then it was one of the top 5 races in the nation. But you know what? I'd say 80% of them are Republicans now. And we loved each other then. We still love each other now. But they just figured out that I was right. But we didn't do it by screaming at each other. We did it by loving each other and talking and having conversations. And that's really, it's harder and it takes more discipline. But I think that is what is going to be powerful. We had a moment after this assassination attempt on President Trump. Didn't you feel it? Where you're like, we have a moment here, like we could have a revival. That's what I felt like. I felt like for 5 or 6 days there, we were like, oh my goodness. And I don't want to wake up anymore and feel like we might have missed it. Yeah. I'm going to choose to believe we didn't miss a chance for us to remember what's special about this country. It was a country founded on right and wrong, on faith, and people who relied on themselves and their freedoms to make sure that they were a country that had rights given to us by our Creator, that we can go out and live a life of freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and live and operate under a constitution that gave us everything every other country didn't give. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Next question.
I have a question from Judy regarding education. Judy?
Well, mine was actually on the border. What can we do to strengthen our borders?
Well, I think it's fairly obvious that we can actually enforce stopping people at the border. And I think that's very important. And I think technology plays a key role in that. And just as she was talking about the Keystone Pipeline, all of the equipment being left there and just abandoned, let's remember that same thing happened at the border when Joe Biden took over and said, we're not going to continue building the wall. And when you have just people down there fighting against people, you have a war, you don't have security. This is not fair to put our Border Patrol in this position. We have a gentleman here in the state of Michigan who just found out that his brother's killer, his conviction was overturned on a technicality. His brother was a Border Patrol agent down south, and now they have to go through this all over again after this happened in, 10 years ago to this family. This is outrageous that we continually allow this to just be like, oh, how could we possibly do it? It's really not that hard. And Kamala Harris saying she's going to hire all these new Border Patrol agents. It goes beyond that. It goes beyond that. There is so much more involved, and that's why I encourage all of you to force the Democrats on your local level to tell you how. How are you going to do that? Don't just accept that, oh, the other side is bad. Don't accept if you don't vote for me, you're under threat. Ask them how, because it has to be a strategic plan, and it has to go beyond an executive order. It would be lovely if we could get Congress together to pass a bill, but do not be deceived by this, oh, Donald Trump is better at whipping votes than we are, and he was able to get people to vote against the bill. I mean, how pathetic, first of all. Why would you admit that? Secondly, there was bipartisan disapproval of this bill. There were people on both sides who said, you are going to make it legal to have thousands of people come across this border every day and put children in danger, continue to do this?
Yes.
You are going to enshrine this in law? No, that is not the answer. The answer is to make sure you have a strong border and a strong immigration plan, and that's not coming from the Harris administration.
Yeah, that bill codified illegal immigration. It said illegal immigration was now going to be law. It would be allowed going forward. All we have to do right now is to enforce our federal law. We just have to follow the law. If we had a president that followed the law, we'd have a secure border. Now, obviously, President Trump has said, build a wall. I'm all in favor of building a wall. I've seen walls work. They work.
Yes.
And we need to continue to do that.
They worked last week in Chicago. I heard they had a wall.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But it's not rocket science. I mean, you follow the law, you build a barrier where you need it, where you know where the vulnerable places on our border are, and you make sure that people have the opportunity to come to the United States of America. They just have to follow the law when they come.
Good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fight for kids. How can you even look away from that? Fight for kids.
Good.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
We have a question now from Joe, and he'd like to talk about voter fraud and election integrity.
That's one of the things I'd like to address to, I guess, Kristi. You've been in the Republican. I want to thank Tudor for bringing all these great Republican women to Detroit, because you had Tulsi Gabbard here last year. I didn't get the email until the next day, and I missed it, but I'm glad you brought her here. But now you brought Kristi, and that's great. And one of my biggest concerns this year is not to get everybody to run out and vote for Trump, because we all voted for Trump last time. The problem is what's going to be done to prevent them from stealing the election. I went to bed at midnight, or a little after, I think it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and Google said Trump was leading by well over 40-something%, and only 0.1% of the precincts had not reported in. I'm thinking, well, that's overwhelming. You can't overcome that. And when I woke up the next day and I found out they had literally flipped the numbers. Now Joe Biden had beat Trump by the exact same margin. It's like they just moved his name from one. Come on. Now, not only has they kept us so busy worrying about Trump in court for 3 years that we haven't been focusing on protecting the election, doing anything to the machines that are able to have internet access, the process itself. In Michigan, and I don't want to blame you, Tudor, it's not your fault, but they changed our Constitution. We're not allowed to have voter ID. And we must have stuffable mailboxes. You can go up and just stuff ballots in there, no monitoring, nothing, just go ahead. And it's required in our Constitution now. What is required? What are they doing to fix that?
Well, you have to I know this question is for you. I'll just say really
secondly,
quickly.
Kristi's a rancher, and so I know you know about the farm. You brought up the farm situation. China's in here buying up all our farms and ranches, and your email, Tudor, alerted me to the fact that they actually built a battery factory in Michigan that you have to declare your loyalty to the CCP to do any business with them. Now, these are huge issues that people have not been mentioned anywhere, not even in Republican spheres.
Absolutely. I mean, the elections issues are very strong here in the state of Michigan. That's why you've seen the RNC sue Jocelyn Benson, and there's been 5 lawsuits that she's lost. I think the most significant is on absentee ballots when she removed the signature requirement, which makes absolutely no sense. Why would you do that? And so the signature requirement was removed in 2020 and 2022, and that lawsuit was just recently won by the RNC. But you have to remember that the RNC couldn't get involved in elections before 2020, and that lawsuit and that ruling was recently changed. And so the RNC is heavily involved now, and I know that you probably aren't seeing things every day, but they are fighting it. And we do have to continue to be vigilant, because I'm just hearing this story in the last couple days that in the primary, Detroit had more than 2,000 additional poll watchers for Democrats than Republicans. Not legal, not how it's supposed to be run. And why is this happening? We have to go back consistently to the Secretary of State. And we have Secretaries of State across this country that are very radical. Remember, when a Democrat says something, they're actually doing it. So when she says she's fighting for democracy, she's actually breaking the rules. And you have to be very careful of what she says. And remember, she's saying clearly she's running for governor. She's been traveling this country with Hillary Clinton. They've been lifting her up. She's the Katie Hobbs of Michigan. She's Secretary of State, running her own election, becoming governor. Be careful, because these people change the rules so they can win. And you shouldn't be allowed. That's why we have to constantly be vigilant and make sure the RNC is on top of it, because somebody has to be watching. It's a shame that you have partisan secretaries of state. It's a shame. It shouldn't be.
Yeah, they're the top election official in every state. So the Secretary of State position is extremely powerful. And if we don't trust our election system, I'm not certain if we trust anything in this country anymore. My concern has always been that we can't just make sure that President Trump wins. He has to win big. He has to win big so that there is no question on election results. The other thing is, in South Dakota, you have to vote on election day with an ID. You have to identify yourself. We only vote on paper ballots, where we do vote on machines in a couple of counties. Our machines are not attached to the internet at all, and so we trust our elections in South Dakota, but we also hold our Secretary of State very accountable. And we have a problem across the country where we don't have enough people that are volunteering to be poll watchers. We don't have enough people who are there willing to make sure that their elections are written correctly. What I've been concerned about all year is that they would do what they did in 2020. Remember, when we had that emergency declaration that happened in the country, it allowed every governor to decide how to run their elections however they wanted to. So I was in 27 states that year campaigning for President Trump. And I saw from state to state how governors decided to run their elections, how they collected ballots. They maybe were collecting it in drop boxes. Some states, in Minnesota was one of them, they had the unions collecting ballots in parking lots, and then they didn't have any supervision. Sometimes they would keep a box full of ballots in the trunk of their car and not deliver it back to the Secretary of State's office or the auditor's office until the next day. Or they would hold the ballots for 2 or 3 days. There was no accountability, no supervision, no integrity whatsoever. I had one lady in one state walk up to me with 4 different ballots in her hand. She said, listen, one of them is made out, they mailed them all to me. One of them's in my maiden name. One of them is my first married name when I was married to my first husband, but I got divorced. One has a middle initial on it, has my middle initial on it. So that one is different as well. And then the other one's in my new married name. So she had 4 ballots that she could vote on and just mail them back in, and all 4 would have been counted because the Secretary of State had never cleaned up the voter rolls. Had never once, when she changed her name, gone back and deleted her other name too. So that happened in some of the states. So I always tell people, they always ask me about that election. And I said, it's not that they cheated, it's that they didn't do one thing, they did everything. Every state was different what they did and how they did it. And that's what I've been concerned about, is there'd be another event, another reason for the Democrats, the White House, this administration, Harris, to say, listen, we need to do an emergency order for something. It could be a national security reason. It could be another pandemic. It could be a financial reason. We have learned, we always say, oh, they'll do anything, and then we're shocked when they do it. Right? Don't we? We need to really realize they literally will do anything. They replaced their candidate, a sitting president, right? Didn't they? And then they picked the craziest, most socialist governor in the country, the most radical, extreme governor who destroyed his state and made him the vice presidential nominee. So the Democratic Party that used to be here is now so far left, they've fallen off the page. They're off the stage. They're clear over living in China. That's who they've put up, and shame on us if we don't tell the world that they will do anything, and we have to help open America's eyes so that they don't do everything to take this election.
But if you call one coach and you call the other mamala, then
Yeah.
you're in good shape.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they think. It's
Yeah.
scary.
Next question.
Okay, I have a question from Jason. He's looking for some advice.
First, I'm a Marine Corps veteran. My wife's a Marine. My daughter's serving in the Marine Corps right now. And, I say that to say you're both incredible, awesome women, and we're so proud of you as a family. And but my question is, I just won a heavily contested race for the Michigan State House of Representatives for the 50th District, and I won it. And it's a 70-30 district, so I'm going to be the next Michigan State House of Representatives for that area. But, yeah. So my question is, what advice would you give to get more people engaged for those that may have a more difficult race, but getting our voters out? We saw that with this early voting, it hasn't been a success in the state of Michigan. As a matter of fact, less people voted in this primary than the one before. So that's my one question. And the other is, outside of obviously the obvious reason why you're having baby booms in your state, what do you attribute that to when other states are not having that? And thank you, and God bless you both. Yeah.
Do you want to talk to the advice for him running his race and helping other
Sure.
candidates win?
First and foremost, don't read the comments on social media.
Yes.
But seriously, I mean, to her point earlier, don't be offended. Keep going through. I mean, it's going to be tough, but the difference, I think, between what I see when we have the RNC convention as compared to the DNC convention is that this is a heart and soul mission. And sometimes I think it's harder when it's deep in your soul that you want to be serving people. And that can discourage a lot of people. And I think it's hard to get people involved from that standpoint. Right now, we are so viciously attacked. I mean, you've seen for months they've called Donald Trump a threat. And then, of course, when people are called a threat, someone wants to eliminate the threat. So you end up with a really bad guy, and boy, does that discourage people from running as Republicans right now. And so I would say there are so many people out there that love you, that respect you. There are people who are afraid to run, and you have to pray about it, and you have to ask God if this is what God is calling you to do. And sometimes it is really easy when God says, no, you're doing this, to be like, nah, I'm good. Trust me, I've been there. Listen to God, pray, sit with your family. So I will say, when I started running, someone said, pick the 10 people you trust the most and have them on your campaign. And by the end, you'll have 5. And go into it knowing that.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's fantastic. I would just say continue to be genuine and normal. And that's why Donald Trump resonates with people, is because he's just normal. He doesn't give a debate perfect speech, or he's himself. I tell people all the time that he doesn't think he's better than anybody else. He really truly doesn't. You talk to anybody who's worked for that man, anybody who's been close to him, he treats them like gold. He asks about their families, he asks about how they're doing, how their business is. He asks them, what he can do to make their job better if they work for him anywhere. They love him because he cares about people truly, and he's normal, and he's genuine. And he has his flaws, and that's fine, and when people attack him, he punches back. So I'd say there might be a time where you gotta punch back. And you gotta stand up and show that you're strong. Yep. Yeah.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Don't be afraid to do that, because people do respect strength. They want you to know that you love people, but they also know that you're going to be strong enough to withstand the headwinds that we've got from the media, from the left, from all this woke that's going on around the country. You can be strong enough to do that and still care about people.
All right, we have time for 2 more questions. Gentleman here.
Well, we'll go fast if you want to ask them fast. We can do 3 or 4, and I can quit talking so much.
I'll be brief. Thank you. My name is Tommy. I'm from Macomb County here. My question is for Governor Kristi Noem. Governor, what kinds of things have you seen worked in your state to combat human trafficking. And keep in mind, obviously in the room here, everyone here knows that we're a border state. But in the state of Michigan, we cannot depend on our governor. So what kinds of things can the populace do to help combat human trafficking that you have seen work? Thank you.
Well, first of all, you have to call it out where it's happening. It was very controversial when I pointed out that the cartels and their affiliates were operating in our tribal lands, because the only way they can operate there is if somebody in tribal government gives them protection, right? If somebody on that tribal council or somebody lets them be there without making sure that the tribal police are there stopping them. So it was very controversial in South Dakota when I boldly said, listen, they are operating trafficking out of our reservations. So be bold enough to call it out when you see it, and then educate people what it looks like. A lot of people don't know what trafficking looks like. It can be sexual trafficking. It also can be labor. It can look so many different ways, whether it's children, whether it's adults. There are so many adult, even males that I know that have come out of situations where they were being trafficked and used, whether it was for labor or for other purposes in this country, and it's a slavery, a modern day slavery that happens. So, and then spend your time making sure that you're aware and observing every situation that you're in, and that when you see it, that you take action. We are people who do a lot of talking. We do a lot of talking, then we walk out of this door and we put our head down and we only worry about our own lives. I would ask you to be people who lift up your chins, look ahead and look around and see the people around you. See what's really happening around you. And teach your kids that too. Teach your kids to be people who, I have 2 girls and a boy, but when Booker was a little boy, he was 4 or 5 years old, and I could tell from the time he was that age, he was probably gonna be a pastor or teacher or something, because we could walk into a restaurant when he was 4 or 5 years old, and we would lose him because he was always chatting with somebody, but he'd be sitting at a table in the corner with one little old man who was sitting by himself. Or he would always be with somebody who was all by themselves, knew the kid in class that didn't have any friends or somebody. But empathy and compassion is the best thing that you can instill in your children. I always tell people that if they haven't gone through anything hard, then that's too bad. That's hard, because the things that my parents gave me by giving us hard things to do created us to be problem solvers. But they also, when you go through something hard, you have more compassion for people around you that are going through challenging things. So stop doing everything for your kids, all right? You are crippling our children when you do everything for them. Let them figure it out, let them face some challenges, and do that, because you will give them confidence to take on the next bigger challenge that they have, and you'll create them to be problem solvers. They'll figure stuff out, and they'll get more confidence and recognize, I guess I can handle tough stuff. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, one question from Matthew. He has a question on mental health.
Yeah, what are we going to do to improve mental health and housing services for people on low income and disability? Because right now, it's just horrible. Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, I think in the state of Michigan, we definitely don't have enough services. We don't have them across the state. We have a significant issue. Even, I mean, as I traveled across the state, I had so many corrections officers say to us, we have people that shouldn't be in the jails. We have people that need mental health help, and we don't have it. And there was an opportunity for the governor to increase one of our facilities, and that didn't get increased to the extent that it should have. So we definitely need to look at how we can improve that across the state. And also, really, there's so many things that need to be done in Michigan. Even in the jails, we don't have enough corrections officers. They even asked the governor if she could send in the National Guard, and they were declined. So we have a significant problem here in the state of Michigan, and this is where I think that the collaboration between Republican governors is so great, because I know that as Republican governors in other states have come across issues, they've gotten together on calls, and even during COVID, got together on calls and said, how do we come around the people in our states and make it better? So I'll defer to you on what you've done.
No, that's what happens when people have a mental health challenge in their lives. A lot of times right now, today, they're ending up in an emergency room or in jail, right?
Yeah.
Because something has happened in their life and they've hit a crisis, and they may end up with an addiction issue or something that puts them in one of those two, and neither one of them is appropriate for that situation. So we in our state, in the last couple of years, have built and funded 5 crisis care centers regionally across our state that's a short term. When somebody's in a crisis situation, they come into that crisis care center and we detox them, we start the counseling process, and we start the referrals to getting them a support system and counseling services that they need. It's made all the difference in the world, and we've engaged our churches. Because so many times people ask the government to do things that churches and people should be doing.
Yeah.
They ask people to walk alongside people, and they ask the government to raise our children. They ask the government to educate our children. They ask the government to feed people. And so much of that, and the responsibility for being a community is the community, the churches, the faith organizations, that we were created to serve each other. And that's a point of it. The one thing that I would say about the situation that we have going on is that in South Dakota, we have just developed, and it'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks, in our elementary schools, a resiliency program. We're going to teach our kids how to have resiliency from the time that they're elementary students, and it's an amazing curriculum that we will give free of charge to all of our school districts if the counselors and the elementary teachers want to use it, but it's called South Dakota Sturdy. And it's using our historical figures to teach them about how they took hard things in their life, challenges, and used them to be stronger and to have the resiliency and to make decisions better and to do it. Because a lot of times we're asking parents right now to be parents that never had good parents. They don't know what it's like to be a good parent because they never had one. And somebody's got to give them an example, and that's what this curriculum will do.
We should have.
We start with Teddy Roosevelt, who you all know the challenges Teddy Roosevelt went through. Goodness sakes, the man was sick and then lost his wife and his mother on the same day and decided he was going to change his life. But some of those skill sets we can build into our children too. How about one more?
Okay.
Grand finale. Oh, no pressure. That looks fantastic.
Yeah, thank you, ladies, for coming to Detroit, to the area, because this doesn't count as Detroit, whether you know it or not. I'm Minister Barry L. Altman. I am a candidate for House District 7 here in Michigan. That is Detroit, Highland Park, and Hamtramck. And one of the things I think about, because the governor just said it, was that President Trump was able to connect with a lot of people by his authenticity. And in Detroit right now, it's hard to get help with the election. It's hard to get help with money, resources, anything. Most people consider Detroit an unwinnable district for a conservative. So that's the mentality of most of our leadership. Now, before Pete Hoekstra came and was voted in as chair of the party, Detroit absolutely got no focus, absolutely nothing. But to Ambassador Hoekstra's credit, he has done what he can, but he's only one guy. He's only one guy. And we need money. I have credibility in Detroit. I'm connected in Detroit. I've been in trouble with the law. I've turned my life around. I'm a businessman. I've had some success. I have some educational success. I need help with money. I couldn't go to a good event last night because of the ticket price. I just couldn't afford to go because I'm spending all of my money on my campaign stuff. It's all coming out of my pocket. And I wanted to thank you. I wanted to ask you if you guys can be of any help in that regard, getting money to candidates who have districts in Detroit. The second thing, I really hope that we get a chance to follow up, because this is what I'm also one of the problems I'm finding, and one of the things I think hurts credibility of the candidates is getting access to them. Guy gives you a card at a function, you call the number, he never answers, never returns a call, never any of that. I'm going to ask for contact information from you guys at the end of this so I can follow up with you, please.
So what are you running for? You're running for?
House of Representatives,
House of Representatives?
Michigan House of Representatives, District 7.
Okay.
And I'm Barry L. Altman. And one more thing, because Detroit—
Who do they make the check out to?
You make out to elect Barry Altman. That's who you elect, Barry Altman. That is the name of my campaign. Detroit is the poorest city in the country. It's hard to even get volunteer help because everybody there is in survival mode. It's hard to get help. I need money. And I got pledge cards if anybody wants one.
I got to tell you, the hardest part, you can clap for him. He put his name on a ballot. That's hard. I tell people the hardest part of this job is asking people for their money, because you know how hard they work for it, and you know that they have other responsibilities, other things they have to take over. So I always tell people every time I go in and have to ask them, I also know I can't win without, if I'm running for office, you can't win unless you have the resources, because you got to fight the media. You're not going to have them telling your story. You're going to have the resources to tell the truth to people. So I always tell them, listen, I hate asking for your money. I also know I can't win without it, but I promise you this, I will be a good investment. And that's one thing that I would encourage you, Barry, to say, I will be a good investment. What I tell you I am today, when I win, I will be exactly what I said I would be. I will go there, I will learn, I will do the research, I will work hard, and I will be a good investment. And people appreciate that because they know that you recognize that their dollars they work hard for and that they're trusting you to be a good steward of it.
Yeah, and I would just say that I think that Republicans are changing the way they're looking at things. You know, we've historically been told you're not welcome here, you're not welcome here. And I will say that when I was running, we had an event and some gentleman came from Dearborn and they said, you know, we were told that if we came to this event, we would be kicked out. And they said, but then we sat here and we heard a lot of things that mean something to our community. And I think it's a shame on us, but it's also a new world where we are realizing that it's time for us to reach everybody. It's time for us to go the places that everybody told us, well, you'll never be accepted there. And I'm so glad that you're doing this. I mean, it means so much to us that you are stepping up and doing this. And that falls on all of us who have run before to answer your call. And I mean it, to answer your call and say, we know someone. I know someone, let me help you, let me introduce you, let me move you along, because this is a group effort and the Democrats do it. They don't lack for money. They have like a pile. I think they do have a money tree. Like, where does this money tree grow for the Democrats? Apparently somewhere in Soros land. But we need to step up. So that's on us, and I will answer your call.
Well, I know we're out of time, but does anybody have something burning they want to pop up and ask quick before they're done? Because I want to say you didn't get an opportunity. I see one here, real fast. Shout it out quick. Where's your teleprompter, Tudor? Where is it? Gutfeld's little, like 4'1" or something. No, I'm kidding. No, he. Oh man, anybody else? Yeah.
That the Democrats are getting away with and the Republicans are not using it is that they say a baby in the womb is a blob of tissue. You can walk in any hospital 4 months, 6 months, 7 months and see a baby that has born premature and walking like crazy. This lie should be exposed and say, okay, folks, you're Democrat. This is what they're preaching. It's a blob. Look at this. Go to the hospital. It's a plain lie, and this is the only way to get to it. I'm a Democrat. They don't lie. Look at what they said.
Yeah, well, and let's remember that they also pull funding from pregnancy centers for people who need health care. So this idea that they provide health care, they pull health care from women who need it.
These three ladies are going to be the last ones, just because they're so adorable. Do you know anything about this?
Yeah, I think it's county canvassers cannot investigate suspected fraud right now. So yeah, they just signed that into. Well, so yeah, so that is something that you can also do. Yes, I know somebody said you don't have to. Oh, I was like, okay, yeah. No, but so you heard a gentleman say you don't have to have ID anymore. Well, you were supposed to come with ID. If you don't have one, you sign an affidavit. This is me. Well, certainly it is a concern, and that is why, this is a bill that just passed, and that's why elections matter.
Got a lot of representatives here and some state senators, so that's why we need to win the House back. We can fix that when you win the House back. Yep. Yes, okay, we're gonna go to the lady right behind you, because then we don't know. And
That's why
what
we need to win the
secretaries-
House back.
That's why you need to win the House back, and they can make sure that there's some integrity there. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think that anytime any community that you live in, you have to be involved in your community. And one of the things that I've heard when you talk about schools, one of the things that I've heard about parents, and I think this is very encouraging, is that when parents go to their local school and they say, hey, you know what, I don't love this, their teachers are like, let's work it out. So we don't, and to your point of not being angry all the time, not being automatically offended and assuming everybody is against you and there's a right and a wrong, sit down and talk about it. Find out the story. It happens, it's locally is the most important. That's where everything happens in your life, in your heart, with your kids. So it is important to get involved locally. Now, I would say that a prayer group is also so important because one of the consistent messages that I heard over the last week was that the Democrat Party is inclusive unless you're Christian. And so we need to be prepared for the attack against Christians, and we need to make sure that we're all praying for one another.
And the world is still moved by people who show up. So just show up. The fact that you show up at all those meetings is powerful. Bring a friend with you the next time. All of you, show up at a meeting you've never gone to before. You're going to be the grand finale. You ready? No, the Constitution did. The vast majority of the power goes to the people, and then the states. They didn't. It's just if the federal government respects the states. That's what it is. Is literally what happened to me, and is that. Listen, when I ran for governor, I wasn't supposed to win. People don't know this about South Dakota. Everybody thinks it's so conservative. It's really populist. When I won governor, I only won by 3 points against a guy who was a Bernie Sanders guy. Yes, so nobody really knows how tough of a race that was, and it was hard. He was a cowboy who had a tragic accident, was in a wheelchair, and talked like he was a conservative, but that was like a knife fight in a ditch. A big factor in South Dakota was that I was a woman. South Dakota was not ready to see a woman. They were okay electing them to office and sending them to Congress, but they weren't quite ready for a woman to be the CEO, to be the boss of the state. And so that was a huge factor in my polling. And so I ran on building stronger families and growing our state. Our state was dying, people were leaving. And I didn't really think about being a woman. I never talked about it until the day I was being sworn in. It was my inauguration, and there was hundreds and hundreds and maybe thousands of people filling the Capitol building, and all the balconies were filled with people. And then when the ceremony started, they started to talk about how historical this event was. And it was historical because I was being sworn in as the first female governor of the state on the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote in our state. And all the songs were picked out to honor that occasion. All the previous speakers talked about that. And I was standing there thinking, man, this is a big deal. And I got really nervous, and I thought, I better not screw this up. You know, I was like, this is like going to be in a history book somewhere someday, and I better make sure that I do a good job. And as I was getting sworn in, and I had my hand on my dad's Bible, and I was thinking, you know, how am I going to do this? It was for the first time I thought, I don't know if I can do this. And I remember I made 2 promises. And one was to uphold the Constitution of the state of South Dakota, and the second one was to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. 2 promises. And I thought to myself, I can do that. 2 promises, that's not hard at all. So that's from day one, I have a form that every one of my staff has to fill out on every idea they bring to me, every bill, and it's the first thing is when it's this bill, this idea, this change we're gonna do, our first question is this constitutional? Do I have the authority to do this? Why do I not have the authority to do this? What happens if this bill becomes law? What happens if it doesn't become law? And the last question is, what does this mean to our next generation? I don't want people thinking about what happens in 6 months for the political purposes. What happens 20 years from now if we do this? What happens, what do we open the door to? What's the precedent we set in court cases if this gets challenged? You know, I want people thinking long term. The question and the problem is that we don't have a president in the White House that respects the Constitution, that gets up in the morning and says, is this constitutional? Do I have this authority? President Trump did. He did. He followed the Constitution. And he said during the pandemic, during everything that I brought to him, that I asked him to let me do, he would recognize, yes, Kristi, go make the best decisions for your people. That is not my authority to do that. This is your authority to do that. That's what we need in the White House again. That's why we need him back. He respects our history, respects our country, and you lose perspective if you're somebody who doesn't appreciate the Constitution and follow it that way. That is what we need to get back in the White House, and that's why we need President Donald J. Trump back, so that we can respect our Constitution and make sure the states have the power. The federal government doesn't have the power.
I want to tell you all, we are so grateful that you're here. I mean, think about this. Look at this room. This on a Friday night, and I know we have a convention tomorrow, so I know a lot of you are giving up your Friday night to be here. This is meaningful. This is from the heart. So again, don't be offended. Talk about it. Have a hug it out. I know my kids watch Trolls all the time. It's hug time. So make sure you make time for hug time. And let's say thank you to this wonderful lady, the governor of South Dakota, who came here to talk to us. We are so grateful to you, but we are so grateful to you. And I hope that it's okay that I speak for these people. We are so grateful that you came and shared this story with us, because you were very vulnerable. You told us about your state. And I think that so many of us need to hear what success looks like, because we haven't seen it in a very long time. But it gives us all hope. And I think right now we're living on fumes of hope. And we know that that comes in every one of us stepping up. So thank you for stepping up, and thank you for being here.
Go be happy and go talk to people. Thank you.